I'd like to start by acknowledging the Mulunjali people of the lands that I'm meeting with you today on, just west of Brisbane. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present and bring greetings from my peoples, the Quandamooka peoples of Minjerribah or North Stradbroke Island, just off the coast of Brisbane. I'd like to pay respects to all the peoples of the lands on which you're all gathering on today and meeting on today to discuss this really important business. And we all pay our respects to their elders past and present as well. Thank you everybody for joining. My name's Dean Parkin. I'm the director of From the Heart. I've met many of you virtually and in person over the last little while. From the Heart is a campaign that has been set up to champion the cause of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and in particular, this idea of a voice to Parliament that is enshrined in the Constitution. That is our core purpose. We're supportive of the entirety of the Uluru Statement, but our purpose for the moment is to focus on the voice and its enshrinement in the Constitution. We're in a really interesting phase right now of the campaign, and I don't mean just now this year. I mean in with regards to this journey on constitutional recognition and reform. It was pointed out to me very recently that that we are into the second decade of the latest iteration of these calls. I haven't been around for the entirety of that period, but have certainly been around long enough to be passionate about what we're trying to achieve here with the From the Heart campaign. So this period of time that we're in now, with which I'll talk to you about, with the release of the government's interim voice co-design report, is a significant milestone, not just now, but for those years that we've been fighting for constitutional recognition, and certainly since the Uluru Statement was released in May 2017. So over the last 12 months or more, the government has been engaged in a process of co-designing what a voice might look like. Minister White has had carriage of that process since October 2019. Professor Marcia Langton and Professor Tom Calmer were appointed to co-chair a series of committees to lead this co-design process, and that co-design process was really about answering this question of what does a voice look like. We've had the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We then had the Joint Select Committee into Constitutional Recognition that was co-chaired by Senators Pat Dodson and Julian Leeser MP, and that co-design report, that Joint Select Committee report made two key recommendations on the voice and on the Uluru Statement. It said there should be, firstly, a process of co-design to determine what the details of this voice would look like: structure, membership, function, those sorts of things. Then following that process, there should be a separate, deliberate process to consider the constitutional and legislative arrangements. How do you actually bring the voice to life? So through that process, those committees worked diligently over the more than 12 months to work on the co-design report. They released their interim report on the 9th of January this year, and they released it for a consultation process to really ask the views of all Australians, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and non-Indigenous Australians, their views on the proposals in that interim co-design report. That consultation process, and I'll repeat it a few times throughout today, that consultation process is open until the 31st of March this year. So it's actually a fairly slim window of time that we all have to make our submissions as clearly as we possibly can. And then following that consultation process, the government will then move to finalise that co-design report, and then, as you'll see in our submission, we'll be advocating very strongly that it moves to that second stage to work on how we can then enshrine the details of that voice in the Constitution and what the legislative arrangements must be to enact it, to bring it to life. Also, I'll just bring your attention to the bottom of the presentation. That is our submission page for where all this information that I'm talking through today will be found, that people can then access. So I'll just give a quick rundown of the interim report that was released on the 9th of January, just to give you a sense. And I'm not going to go through, this isn't a comprehensive summary by any means. This is a summary that's particularly relevant to the From the Heart campaign and our push for a constitutionally enshrined voice. And as that last point says, it's 239 pages long. So there's a considerable amount of work that's gone into this. And not all of it is directly relevant to the key points of our campaign. But I do want to start by acknowledging and congratulating the work of the Minister and the co-design committees. It's a really difficult task, and we knew that it was going to be a very difficult task to not only work through the significant historic body of work that's already been undertaken in terms of representative structures for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the various voices that have gone before, but to understand the current landscape and how that currently works, and how to bring that together into a very coherent report, and then how to do that in the middle of a global pandemic. So it's important, and I will emphasize this, that we do welcome the report, and we want to acknowledge the work of everybody that was involved in those committees, and it is absolutely, as point 2 talks about, this is a really important milestone, and it's a really important milestone in our journey towards a constitutionally enshrined voice. That will always be unapologetically our mission. That's why we exist as a campaign. And the release of this report and the release of the details of the report provide us with an opportunity, provide everybody with an opportunity to have their say and continue our pathway that started, more than a decade ago, on this pathway to meaningful constitutional reform for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Just quickly, in terms of some of the recommendations, and one of the things to acknowledge about co-design too, and I've been involved in other co-design processes previously, this isn't about, it's not a critique process. Co-design deliberately leaves the proposals unfinished. There's space to add, and there's space to propose, and there's space to put different ideas in. So it shouldn't be seen as a critique, and it shouldn't be approached that way. It should be proposed to say, let's fill in the white space that's still there, as a result, deliberately, as a result of what the co-design process has already done. Point 3, I think really importantly, and we should acknowledge the wins when they arrive. The co-design report proposes that the voice should speak to both the Parliament and the government, and it should have a say on both policy and legislation, and as early as possible in those processes. And that's a win for us, because that's something that we've campaigned very, very strongly about. There had been consideration that this should just be a voice to government only, and that it wouldn't speak to the Parliament, but the co-design committees have said, no, you cannot separate the two. It must speak to both the Parliament and government on policy and legislation. So that's encouraging that our supporters have helped us influence that process already. The report covers both the national and regional local voices. We've largely, as you'll see in the report when you have a chance to read it, our submission, sorry, we've largely focused our efforts on the national voice. That's been deliberate. There are a lot of local and regional voices out there. There's a number of different ways that people are organising themselves and expressing their voices where they live. And it's actually important that they have a strong input into how local and regional voices should be organised and how they should fit in with the national voice as well. So our focus has been very much so the national voice, and we're really looking forward to seeing what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in particular have to say about how those local and regional voices work. It's important to note that the report does not cover the constitutional and legislative form of the voice. I've seen some reporting already that it's a little bit mischievous in suggesting that that's not a good thing. We always knew that at the beginning of this process. The terms of reference were very, very clear at the beginning that the co-design committees would not be considering that. So it's not a surprise. It's not. There's no value judgment to be made of that. That allows us to focus on the design part of the voice. That being said, our purpose as a campaign is for a constitutionally enshrined voice. So we obviously make that point in our submission that is the ultimate endpoint for all of this work. That enshrinement, that constitutional recognition is inextricably linked with the design of the voice. So that's just a brief summary on the report. I would encourage you to read it, given the work that's gone into the report, and we've got links to that on our website, as you'll see. So our submission, and you'll be able to see where that is on the website. It can be summarised in 3 key points, and these are the 3 points that we are asking all of our supporters to get behind. And certainly through the upcoming week of action, these are the messages that we will be promoting heavily and asking our supporters to speak to with clarity and purpose. The first is that the government must honour its election commitment to a referendum once the model for the voice has been settled. This speaks to the fact that we are only talking about the voice now because of more than a decade's worth of reform, of hard work, hard policy, legislative, legal work, community work. People have invested their cultural capital into this and their intellectual capital into this around this question of constitutional recognition, constitutional reform. It remains a bipartisan commitment. Both parties took constitutional recognition to the election last year, and the government made an election commitment to a referendum once a model for the voice has been settled. So this is us saying, yep, let's keep the voice and constitutional recognition together as Uluru did. Secondly, and that's probably an obvious point for those of you who've been following us for a while. Secondly, this is a really important point in being very clear on what we mean by that the sequencing is really important, that enabling legislation for the voice must be passed after a referendum has been held in the next term of Parliament. And it is important for our supporters to understand this sequencing issue. There's been some commentary that that perhaps we could legislate now following this co-design process, and that in some undefined date in the future, people will be comfortable enough with the voice and will have enough practice and will trial the idea of a voice, and then we'll go to a referendum to enshrine it in the Constitution. Our view is that will, with almost great certainty, result in constitutional enshrinement of the voice never happening. It's critically important that the commitment is to a referendum, and that the voice is then, after the successful referendum, enabled in legislation. And we actually propose a process by which that can happen. We think it is right that the Australian people get an idea of the detail of what a voice should look like, and we believe that there is an opportunity for us to do that by developing an exposure draft bill that fills in the details of the design of the voice that can then be made into legislation after a referendum has been held. So that satisfies this requirement that people understand what they're voting for. They get to see the details, they get to understand it inside out, so that when the referendum is held, we can then enact the voice and enable the voice through legislation. It's a really important point for the success of the campaign and to ensure that the vision of Uluru is seen through. And finally, we make a point about the membership model for the national voice. And I think this is something that I certainly heard as I co-facilitated the regional dialogues and the National Constitutional Convention, and many of the conversations that I've had since, is that we got to make sure that the membership model is of a sufficient scale that it allows previously unheard Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to have the same chance of being selected as established leadership figures. It's a really important point, because we want to make sure that those voices, those community-facing voices, have a real opportunity not just to determine who the national voice members might be or have a say in that, but actually sit there and bring their experience and bring their knowledge and wisdom to the national conversation. That's what's going to make this a really effective voice. So there are our 3 key points. We go into them in more detail in the submission, and I encourage you to read them, to read that submission. It's not an incredibly long-winded document, but this is the key point of our week of action that I'll talk about in just a little minute, on that commences next Monday, the 25th of January. These are the points that we want our supporters to make. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, people are free to write whatever they want and make a submission however they want on the issues that they want. We're saying the most valuable way of supporting our campaign directly is individuals and organisations getting behind this and making these 3 key points. And so the week of action, as we've talked about for a while, and acknowledge Thomas being the originator of the idea. The week of action is really just to drive public support behind our position and really kick off this engagement process, this consultation process with momentum. We want to raise public awareness about the consultation process, so we want people to participate in this and inform people about our submission that is guided by the Uluru Statement. We want a large number of high quality individual submissions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, to the consultation process. And we just want to build and demonstrate a wave of public support from a wide range of people for our goal of a voice enabled by the Constitution. I've been continually surprised and very much encouraged by the different voices of people that I've come across that are in support of our movement, and now's the time for action. Now is the time to demonstrate that, and that's what our submission and our week of action is all about. Go to the resources centre, first line down, make a submission. So if you just scroll down, we've got some introductory text there. As I said before, your submission will show that a voice enshrined of the Constitution is a fair go, a practical change, supported by the Australian people, and a unifying opportunity. We've got some introductory text there, a reminder that submissions must be made by the 31st of March. So it's important that we get them in now. These next 4 points are really about how we can be most effective from our point of view in support of the campaign. So those 3 positions that I just talked about on the slideshow before, we'd like you to support those 3 positions really, really clearly. This is really important. We'd like you to use your own words to make your submission. It's less useful for us if we just copy and paste our words into a document or into the submission and submit it that way. I understand it's really convenient, and I understand you want to stay true to the messages that we have, but it's important that they're personalized. What tends to happen in some of these committee processes is that if the committees receive a template response or a large number of responses that are utterly identical, they can they're noted and acknowledged, but they can also be treated as one grouped together submission. So personalization and using your own words while retaining the key messages is really important. This third point is really important too. As I said before, co-design is an actual process. We want this to be a really constructive process. And if I can just be really blunt, this isn't the time to be unnecessarily or overtly critical of the process, of the proposals, or more generally. It's about being constructive. It's about participating in good faith in the co-design process. That's how we've crafted our submission. That's how we want it to be understood and received. And that's certainly how we'd expect and want all our supporters to do so as well. And lastly, in terms of being really effective, we do want our focus at this point in time in the process and in terms of the campaign to focus on the voice. We do know, I know, there are a range of issues that are out there, both regarding Uluru Statement and other issues as well. There'll be a time through the campaign where we talk about that, but for now, in terms of what we're trying to achieve, clarity and being succinct about exactly what we're advocating for here is really important. So I'm asking when people are wanting to support our position that we really focus in on the 3 key points that we've made. And lastly, this doesn't have to be an onerous process. Don't think about this as an insider's game or a academic process that needs to be fully justified. Actually, it's really about getting to the main points, and it can be, you know, your submission could be as short as 3 sentences to get the key points across. It shouldn't be seen as a really onerous and difficult process to do. So just a bit further down, we've got on the left-hand side there our key submission points, as I've discussed previously. We have links to our detailed submission here, which you can download in a PDF, and we've got a very, very short, it's 2 pages plus a covering page version of our submission if you really want to cut to the chase of the key points. On that brief submission, each of those key points are explained in more detail in the body of our full submission. That's just there for your information, and I'd encourage you to share that with your networks and with your communities as well. And then on the right-hand side here, we've got a how to make your submission step by step. So read our submission in our summary document, draft your own submission. Remember that we're talking about a fair and practical change. Visit the portal. So if you just run over that link there, that will then take you to the government's submission page, where it provides further information for you then to make your own submission. And you can do that through either an existing PDF or Word document, or there's a field in the portal where you can actually fill in the text yourself, or you can cut and paste the text out of any existing document. So you can spend the time to sit down and write it on a Word document and then copy and paste it in, if that's copy and paste your own words in, if that's helpful. Then you upload your submission and pass on the information to all your communities and your networks that this is something that you've done, and the more people we get involved, the more chance we have of really influencing serious change. We've just got a little bit of information there about why must a voice be enshrined in the Constitution. I'll leave that to you. What I want to get to is the week of action. So this is at the bottom of the page. This is really about a campaign within a campaign. It's about raising awareness about our submission, as previously talked about, and encouraging. The core focus, if nothing else, is to get people backing in behind our position, our submission. This is real people power in action, and it's actually, you know, pretty exciting to be part of. The week of action will be held from the 25th to the 31st of January, so it starts next Monday. So we've got a couple of days to prepare and get the word out amongst our networks. And as I said before, the consultation process finishes on the 31st of March. The week of action is a really simple premise. And Thomas can attest to this too. I think if we were to take a poll, the most asked question that we get in any campaign, and certainly this campaign, is what can I do? What is it that I can do as a supporter? Well, this is the answer. This is the answer. We want you at its core to make a submission, to encourage your family and friends and your networks and your communities to make a submission, and then just participate in these very simple daily activities, which I'll talk you through in a minute, on a day basis for 7 days. And it's just to create that momentum. Now, I will say this, we've put a schedule of events down. We've put a schedule of activities down, but don't feel limited by that. If you look at our list and go, there's other things I could do, then do it. We just want to maintain momentum over the course of a week. So feel free to be creative, and feel free to advocate for this in the way that makes most sense to you. We've got a hashtag there, week of action activities. We've also got our digital canvas for people to sign. So already, I think, I'm not sure what the number is at the moment. I think it's more than 4,000. Yeah, there you go, 4,159 supporters have signed the canvas. This link takes you to that page. If you haven't already done that, add your name to the delivery statement canvas. We'd like people to do both. We'd like to do submissions and the canvas. It's important to know that only the submission that you make will be counted towards the government's co-design process. The canvas won't, but it is important also that we get more and more faces signed up to that and sharing their stories about why the delivery statement is important to them. And then finally, at the bottom of the page, we've just got a number of tools for people to use. We've got some logos that you can use for social media. We've got this Facebook profile picture frame, which is day one's activity, which I'll get to in a second. So if you click on that, that will then direct you to Facebook and allow you to change your profile picture. Mine's already like that, with a range of Facebook frames. Would obviously like you to do the, I support the Uluru statement. That's an easy thing to do there. I just have go back here. So that's challenge one. We have a bunch of social media tiles here that are related to the various actions that are occurring through the week. Having a conversation with people and with your family and friends about why it's important. We have posters here that you can print or otherwise display. And here we've got a week of action summary. And the schedule. So this, if people are saying, yeah, I'd like to be involved, but what does it actually mean? Can you talk me through it? There's a bunch of summary information here that talks about our submission, that talks about the objectives of the week of action. It's got links to our website, the canvas, the submission page. And then it's got at the bottom, the second page, this is the schedule of action that we have planned. So the week of action runs 25th to the 31st of January. And action one is always going to be make a submission and sign the digital canvas. If you've already done both of those, amazing. the action in that is to encourage everybody around you to do the same. So that's a standing action we're going to do every single day of the week. So, for example, on the first day, action 2 is apply the Facebook profile frame to your profile and let people know about it, and circulate an electronic direct mail with your networks about the week of action. That's just basically circulate an email. And if you see back here, just scroll down, you'll see that we've drafted an email for supporters. So that allows you to take a set of words that we've put together to describe the week of action. Feel free to tailor it. Feel free to put it in your own words. It's just there to help make it easy for you to send on to your supporters. We've also got here a media release or a draft media release for supporting organisations. Again, it's a guide. Don't expect people and organisations to stick to the exact letter of it, but it's there to use to send out to raise awareness within your own organisation, within your networks, to let people know that you were participating in the week of action. And again, it's got more information there that you can share with your supporters. And we also have a version of that guidelines that I was scrolling through on the website previously. That's again that's in a PDF form that you can download and attach to an email or print it out and give it to people, so that if they don't have easy access to the internet, that they can at least read what this is about and participate. And there's links in those documents as well that will just guide people straight back to the submission page. So that's the materials that we've got. That's the supporting information that we have in terms of the week of action. As I said, it's all about a really constructive participation in this process. It's a very important process. It has implications, not just for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but for our nation. And it's something that I encourage everybody wholeheartedly, full-heartedly, from the heart, that we all get involved. Now, the week of action and this period of time right now is really about kickstarting the process. If you miss the week of action, or people feel like they've missed out and get a bit down about it, don't worry about it. We've still got to the 31st of March to make sure that those submissions get in, and would encourage people to continue the momentum, to really, and we'll probably in all likelihood have another week of action soon while this consultation period is still open, and we'll be having other ways to drive more support and keep that momentum going as we move through. Thanks a lot, everybody, and looking forward to seeing you in the week of action.